Hello and welcome to the third episode of Season 4 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Melissa Whitecross, coming to you live from Johannesburg. We have over 125 episodes recorded and available on YouTube. So if you miss out because of load shedding or your Tuesday nights have gotten too busy, never fear, you can always catch up later. Tonight, we are excited to have yet another AV tourism themed webinar for you, highlighting one of South Africa's hidden gems, the beautiful Hogsback. But before we get to that, please remember that you can use the Zoom chat and Q&A feeds or our Facebook comment feed to communicate with our speaker this evening, and we will answer all of your questions at the discussion period after the webinar. So stick around once Cassie's done presenting for some interesting chats. We also have some amazing Bird of the Year merchandise on sale at Shop for the Birds, including pin badges, t-shirts, fluffies, and much more. So be sure to buy yours via BirdLife South Africa's online store. We are also on all major social media channels, and you can use that hashtag conservation conversations to let us know that you are tuning in and let us know what you think of the show. We aim to keep these webinars free for all to learn and enjoy. So if you are enjoying the series and if you are able to contribute, no matter how small, please visit the Cricket page or EFT BirdLife South Africa directly and use the reference webinars with your name. A big thank you to all of you who continue to support us despite the challenging times we all face. Now, have you booked your spot for Flock to Wilderness yet? This promises to be an incredible event full of exciting birding excursions, top speakers, a showcase in quality ornithological research, and a gathering of passionate bird enthusiasts. The event will take place at the Wilderness Hotel from 24 to 28 May 2023, and bookings are open via BirdLife South Africa's website. World-renowned photographer Richard Black will be presenting a Canon-sponsored photography workshop on the 28th of May, that's the Sunday after our AGM, with only 50 places available. This promises to be an extremely interesting and intimate workshop for any photography enthusiast, and Richard will be sharing his insights and philosophies into how to capture beautiful shots that tell a wonderful story. Spots are limited, so be sure to book yours ASAP. BirdLife South Africa's AGM will take place on the Saturday, and we'll have a luncheon after the meeting. So be sure to visit our website and find out more. BirdLife South Africa and Outland Escape Tours have joined forces to organize the 2023 Hiking and Biking for Birds Adventure Series, with 6 events happening at 6 different locations throughout the year. Money raised from these events will support the empowering people and regional conservation programs, and this event will also alternate with hiking and biking, and they're not aimed to be strenuous, so it's just an enjoyable way to find those special birds in each of these regions. And lastly, there are just 7 days to go until BirdLife South Africa launches its photography competition in partnership with Canon South Africa. There are some phenomenal prizes up for grabs. Go and check it out on our website. The winner will win an all-inclusive trip to Tswalu Kalahari Reserve with the top Canon photography equipment at your disposal. But on to tonight's main event. Cassie Carstens has a colorful background fueled by a passion for nature and sharing his extensive knowledge of it with everyone who is lucky enough to cross his path. A former Tux FM DJ and research manager for the Cape Parrot project, Cassie spent the better part of the last decade conserving and studying threatened bird species in South Africa, with stints in the Lowveld working on southern ground hornbills prior to relocating to the beautiful town of Hogsback, where he became intimately familiar with the Cape Parrot and its incredible misveld forests. Cassie's also a qualified nature guide with a specialization in forest birds, so he is certainly the right man to talk to us this evening. And he now holds the most important position, one very close to my heart, of Secretary Bird Conservation Officer at BirdLife South Africa. And we are absolutely thrilled to have Cassie on the BirdLife South Africa team working on those mighty, mighty secretary birds. Cassie, it's awesome to have you with us. Thank you so much for making the time, and welcome to your Conservation Conversations debut. I know this will be the first of many to come.
Thank you, Melissa. Just the normal, is my screen showing Zoom question? Thank you. The obligatory. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Warm greetings, and it's wonderful to be able to share this wonderful town that I called home for 6 years with you all, whether you watch it this evening or whether you watch it at some later stage on YouTube. I hope to take you on a whirlwind tour of the town and all the things it has to offer. We'll be spending some time covering the amazing landscapes that the mountain town has, the lush forests, raging waterfalls and snow-covered hills. And of course, we'll talk about all the amazing birds that call this spectacular town home. Over the past 6 years, I've had the privilege of 2016 to 2021. I had the privilege of calling that little mountain town my home. And during the last 2 of those, I started a little company that conducted forest-focused birding tours in and around town. That was after I qualified as a bird guide, and forest birds became my speciality. So I had the privilege of showing many people the forests and their birds. And tonight's presentation is a dedication to each and every one of you that I took out into the hills. So a brief few selected pictures that I could find of some of the people that I took around. So thank you for this and for the fond memories. Just the one small housekeeping task that we need to finish off before we start our journey this evening. I would like to say thank you to the 2 people who provided some images for me for this evening's presentation. Graham Russell, resident of Hogsback and my longtime birding companion and Big Birding Day teammate, for all the pictures of the birds that I did not have. Uncle, thank you. And the next time I'm in town, the beers will be on me. Graham's images will be marked with a GR. And then my dear Italian friend, Maria Bobbio, here in the foreground of the image on the right, for the 2 images of the waterfall. Grazie mille, Monella, per le immagini. Maria's images will be marked with an MB through the course of this evening's presentation. So let's get started. As with most bird tours, you need to know where you are going. And for those of you who have never been to Hogsback, it's deep in the eastern Cape province of South Africa, deep in the Amathole Mountains. If you decide to fly in, the nearest city you will reach is East London on the Indian Ocean coast, about 150 kilometers from Hogsback, a journey of between 1.5, maybe 2 hours, depending on traffic and the number of cattle that walk across the road. The first town that you will pass through is called Courtenay. You get that? Courtenay. Yes. If you don't recognize the name, don't worry. It's the town formerly known as King Williamstown. Although that acronym doesn't really work. The new name is a tongue tire, so practice it a little bit. Up next, we will go through Alice, home to the University of Fort Hare, the university that most of you will most certainly know about. If you ever choose to drive to Hogsback, chances are that you will come from inland, passing through Fort Beaufort. This town is home to 2 of the greatest things on this planet. One of them is a butchery, the other one is a farm stall, but I'll leave that for you to discover, because just outside of Alice, we are turning north on the R345 and heading up towards Hogsback. We'll be driving along potholey roads, twirling, swerving through mountains, past the first few waterfalls until we get right to the top. Now, Hogsback, situated at an average of 1,300 meters above sea level, is located in the eastern parts of the Amathole mountain range. It's one of those unique destinations in South Africa, and it holds a special rustic charm all of its own. The town's population is just over 500 people, and it consists of academics, recluses, and hippies, retirees, you name it. There's misty forests, raging waterfalls, some of the clearest night skies that you could possibly find across South Africa, and wonderful, wonderful mountain views. But possibly the best known reason for people to visit is the winter months when there's a bit of snow. Some years there's only a little bit, a scattering of flakes on the mountain ridges. Other years there's a lot, like really a lot, as in the town comes to a standstill a lot. Although the sights are truly breathtaking and the landscapes awe-inspiring around town, these are mere distractions since we aren't here for them, really. We are here for the birds. We will start our trip in the Hogsback State Forest. It's the closest and most accessible of the forests around town, and it covers the south-facing slopes of a hill called Tordoon that looms over the town. This small patch of southern mist belt forest is where we will get our day's activities going. There's a few key sites that we will focus on. The first is the Arboretum, the proverbial beating heart of town. Each and every resident will be able to point you in its direction. So if you ask, they will be able to tell you. If you get lost, don't worry, you are sorted. This exotic garden began as a testing ground for some of the timber trees that they wanted to propagate in the region for the timber industry. And this Arboretum is where we will find the most important bird in town. We will find it right there at the top access gate along the main road. And yes, it's Bird of the Year for 2023, the Cape Parrot. I'm not going to say too much about it this evening. It was covered a couple of weeks ago in incredible detail by Dr. Francis Brook of the Cape Parrot Project and Professor Colleen Downs of the University of KwaZulu-Natal in one of the conservation conversations right here. So if you want to learn more about these amazing birds, do go look on YouTube and follow the video. It's quite an amazing tale. All I'll do today is tell you that Hogsback is, in my opinion, and I've got the facts to prove it, the only town in South Africa where you are able to see a Cape Parrot every single day, provided, of course, that you know where to look. So this top access gate to the Arboretum along the main road is one of those sites. There's a big eucalyptus tree with a dead crown, and sunrise every morning, sunrise, that's the critical time. There's a flock of between 2 to 20 birds that gather there. They roost in the area, they fly in there, they spend some time before they fly off to go forage. If you are a little bit late after sunrise, you might miss them. If you are there before, you'll definitely get them. This is a guarantee. So if the Bird of the Year is on your checklist for this coming few remaining months, you now know where to go and find them. The Arboretum is where you will find one of the most accessible waterfalls in town. This one is called 39 Steps. It's an easy and flat walk to get to and well worth a little bit of extra time to get there. So spend some time in the area because there's a few other amazing trees that you can also gawk at and look up into the awesome sky. Due to the number of exotic flowering trees, shrubs, azaleas, tree fuchsias that are planted across this Arboretum, it attracts the first of the birds that we will start ticking on our list. The two most common sunbirds that we find in Hogsback, greater double-collared and southern double-collared, will be flitting back and forth. Differentiate between them, of course, with the greater having a broader red stripe on the breast, and the southern. African dusky flycatchers is also a regular resident of the Arboretum. You can find them perched prominently along the trails and walkways, giving their chirping calls. On the open bits in between the trees, you will find the town's alarm call or the alarm clock. They will be feeding on the giant earthworms that you can find in this region of the Eastern Cape. They reach truly monstrous proportions. That's the worms, not the hardy-does. By the way, have you noticed that the name has changed? It's no longer hardy-da ibis. It's now hadada ibis. Go and have a look. That caught me by surprise a little bit a few weeks ago. I'm not 100% sure yet how I feel about that name change. Some of the more common birds you will encounter throughout town can easily be found here as well. Small family groups of dark-capped bulbuls flying back and forth, and olive thrushes are very busy in the undergrowth and leaf litter-strewn corners of the Arboretum. It's also probably the best place to get up close and personal with African paradise flycatchers. These altitudinal migrants move into the Arboretum during the spring and summer months, and multiple pairs can be encountered nesting in this area. They spread into the gardens of the rest of the town as well, but here you can get nice and close without trespassing on someone's property. Keep an eye out, however, in some of the larger trees on the edge of the Arboretum for the few brood parasites that might be lurking. Lesser honey guides, brown-backed honey guides, they can be encountered every now and then. As you leave the Arboretum, spend some in the adjacent wetland. This open area covered with thick layers of bracken, bramble, and reeds, with just the odd arum lily sticking its head out, is where we will find all of our little brown jobs. Most prominent of them, Levalens cisticula. There are two family groups in the wetland, a family group on either end. They seem to get along amicably, but they don't take kindly to human presence. So loud calls will be following you for the entire time that you walk through this little wetland area. Other one will be lazy cisticulars. They can be distinguished easily from the more colorful lavalents with their drab coloration. The trick with LBJs I found is to determine beforehand which species you are expecting to find in the area or the site that you are visiting. Get to know them very well, both their looks and their calls, and then only can you head out in the field. In the wetland in Hogsback, there's only 4 that you need to worry about. We've dealt with 2 of them. So here's the third one, Nediki. They are darker in color, darker gray, and they will call non-stop during the warmer months of the year. And then the last one, the 4th, Drakensberg Prinia. Remember, we are high altitude, so Drakensberg. If you drive back down the pass towards Alice, then you'll be lower altitude, and there you will find Karoo Prinias. The 2 species are easily differentiated by the proportion of striping on the breast and body. The Drakensberg has less, only on the upper part of the breast. Flitting through the thickest parts of the wetland, you will encounter African firefinches, and perched sentinel-like on the small dead trees, you will regularly count a couple of African stonechats as well. Oh yeah, mixed in with the firefinches, you'll definitely find some swee waxbills as well, especially when the grasses in the wetland are seeding. And it's also the only place in town that you will regularly find a southern fiscal. They are most common there just after it's been burned, when the grass and the area is slightly shorter, or the ground cover is slightly shorter, and then they kind of move off a little bit. So for that period after a burn, you'll find southern fiscal quite regularly. But at this stage, we are itching to get into a forest. We've now walked around outside of it for long enough, so we're going to take this small little climb up through the Arboretum and into the Circle Trail. Now, this trail is about 3.5 kilometers in length. We will walk it anti-clockwise, my apologies. And this is where we will start our search for all the forest specials. And the one that we will start our day with is, without a doubt, the one that most people come looking for, orange ground thrush. Now, a fair warning immediately right at the start. The day that you decide that you are going to go out to find an orange ground thrush is the day that you will not find them. Yes, the day that you just go walking in the forest without binoculars or a camera, they will be running circles at your feet. So yeah, that's unfortunately the rhythm that I have found that they follow. This near endemic to South Africa can be found in most of the forests around town, but they do require a bit of luck to locate. What I've found is, if you focus on this eastern part of the Circle Trail, you are increasing your chances. The path crosses a number of small streams. Pause, spend some time at each of them. On the upper Contour Trail, after you've now climbed up and now walking back towards the Arboretum, I'm kind of 100% certain that there's a pair breeding. So walk slowly, take your time, especially during the spring and summer months. Right. An interesting note about their calls. They do sound similar to the orange ground thrush that we've just discussed a little while ago. And when you compare them, there are only a few subtle differences. The main one I found, however, is the timing of their calls in the morning. Olive thrushes start calling from first light, and they keep going through most of the morning. While the orange ground thrushes, they kind of take their time a bit. They only get going a little bit later, and the male will be perched just below the canopy. So that's one of the, or two at least, of the differentiating things that you will be able to look for to tell them apart from the orange thrushes. At each one of those small streams, keep your eye out for some of the other specials, white-starred robin and bush blackcap. Both are found here, the former being a bit more common and easy to find. Forest birding is based largely on listening first and watching second. If you familiarize yourself with calls, you are already halfway into the forest. The dense nature of it and the limited fields of view that you have do make birding difficult. But if you are able to triangulate a call, you make your life a little bit easier. So bush blackcap, get to know their call. That's, I found, the only way that you are able to find it in the forest. One of the ones that you won't struggle with, however, is yellow-throated woodland warbler. This forest special occurs all along the trail. You will encounter multiple pairs calling their short little staccato contact calls, and they come up right to the edge of the path. So chances of you encountering at least this one is pretty high. Niger Tiracos can be found throughout town, but they are very active in the Hogsback State Forest. You will frequently encounter pairs or small flocks flying in the upper canopy, and they'll be chasing and calling back and forth. And they'll sometimes drop quite low to feed on fruits. A rarer find will be the olive bushshrikes. I've only encountered them on a few occasions in this forest, and they can be heard calling from some of the lower parts on the forest's edges along those streams that we've mentioned. Pairs and small family flocks of grey cuckoo shrikes are common in most of the area and will move with a leisurely pace through the forest canopy, so you won't have to run to find or see them. And of course, when there's a large amount of fruit available, African olive pigeons will be flocking in massive numbers. So spend some time looking above the canopy as well if there's a clearing or two. The cousin to the African paradise that we've just mentioned a little while earlier, and this time a full-time resident in the forest around Hogsback, the blue-mantled crested flycatcher. Usually in pairs, they are territorial, and their contact calls sound very similar to those of the African paradise flycatcher. So spend some time when you hear that two-note zweet-zweet contact call. The second note of the African paradise flycatchers, I think, are slightly lower. So it's a zweet-zweet, whereas the blue-mantled are almost on the same tone. That's what I think. That's what I found in Hogsback. It might just be a regional variation in their vocalization. And as we turn around and head back down towards the Arboretum, we'll keep our eyes out open and our ears open for some of the other regular forest residents. And the two most widely distributed apalises in South Africa, the yellow-breasted and the bar-throated, will be present along the entire trail as well. They are mostly along the forest edges, so be sure to listen when you reach that. And small groups of terrestrial brown bulls will be present in most of the forest, provided that there's enough ground cover. So be prepared to spend some time on your hands and knees, peering into the shrubs on the path's edge in order to see them clearly. Right, so first forest done. And we've compiled a respectable list, and invigorated, we head downwards into the Auckland State Forest. We will focus our efforts on the eastern parts of this large forest reserve. Before we get there, however, we will have one quick stop. It's a property called Hunterston. Now, the owners have generously opened a part of the property to the public, where a series of trails meanders from the road to the Swallowtail Waterfall. Now, the trails crisscross the upper tributaries of the Tiume River, and along the banks and rocky pools is where we will try and find some mountain wagtails. There are usually a pair present, and sometimes with youngsters, maybe two of their most recent brood. They will move up and down the waterfall during the day. And it's quite a drop down into the forest, of course. So if you don't see them the first time you visit, do return at a later stage. You might just see them. And you will encounter Cape wagtails through the rest of town, but this is the only spot where I've regularly found the mountain wagtail. Differentiate between them, of course. The mountain is this ash gray and a little bit of a longer tail. The jackpot, however, will be if you hit this one, the grey wagtail. Now, this vagrant has now been recorded at the Swallowtail Waterfalls on 3 occasions in Hogsback over the past decade, with the most recent one being the only twitch that I was responsible for in my life so far. I observed a pair in November of 2021, so you might not know what you will find the day that you stop in at Swallowtail Waterfall. The trail that we will walk through the forest passes through the length of it, and there's an access point on the western edge from the Away with the Fairies Backpackers Lodge. There's an eastern access as well at the Madonna and Child Waterfall. You can walk from either end, doesn't matter. It's steep down at both of them, which of course means that it'll be a steep climb back up, which will be quite the workout. But believe me, it is quite worth it, especially if you drop down to the Madonna and Child Waterfalls, possibly the most spectacular of the lot that you can find in Hogsback. The falls, of course, named after that central prominent rock feature that supposedly looks like Madonna and the Child. If you are feeling adventurous, consider abseiling down. Yes, There's a small company in town that offers this as an adventure activity, and it's much quicker to get down than walking down the windy staircase. So yeah, think about it. It might just be a lot of fun. From end to end, the trail is about 5 kilometers in length. If you come from the Madonna and Child side, stop in at the Bridal Veil Falls, but do continue on to reach the big tree, a towering giant Otaniqua yellowwood. It's called the Eastern Cape Monarch and towers above the canopy, reaching up to almost 40 meters in height. It's got, by now, would be pushing 9 meters in like circumference. The tree is estimated to be more than 800 years old. So to put that in perspective, like it's sometimes difficult to find an exact historical event. But if we go back to the year 1223, just as a rough estimate, this tree would have been a sapling during the slow transitional period of the Ukalanga Kingdom from the Mapungubwe Kingdom complex on the confluence of the Limpopo and Shasha rivers in the northern parts of South Africa, as they moved up to the Great Zimbabwe Kingdom complex just outside of Masvingo in Zimbabwe. So that's how long ago that took place. Now you might be thinking, Cassie, I don't care about big trees or Iron Age archaeological history, so I'm here for the birds. Why on earth should I tackle this steep climb down and steep climb back up? Well, there's one reason, and this is it. Narina trogon. The Auckland State Forest is the area where I have encountered them most frequently, with a highlight being watching 2 pairs chase each other over the course of a morning, in which I could only assume was a dispute over a nesting site. During the breeding season, they are much easier to find. You will listen out for their call, a hoarse, repetitive hooting, and you'll follow it until you find them. They normally start calling in about October, but by January, they will be quiet again, and finding them will entail a big amount of luck of you looking in the right place at the right time. Although these occur in other forests around town as well, your chances of seeing African emerald cuckoo, brown scrub robin, and chorister robin chat are just that little bit higher in the Auckland State Forest, I feel. The chorister, especially the great mimicker of the forest, are one of my favorite birds and a highlight of each and every trip. To hear an African crowned eagle doing its soaring display call from a lowly plectranthus shrub on the forest floor will make you stop for a brief moment before you walk onwards with a shake of your head and a smile on your face. Crowned hornbills are less common, but when found can provide quite the distraction. These cavity nesters can move quite far between the patches of forests, and you'll also frequently cross paths with the black-backed puffback. Interestingly, in this part of the country, their call is slightly different. If you hail from the northern parts of South Africa, especially the Kruger National Park, where I heard them most recently, their display call will consist of a click and a whistle. Now, forgive me for my poor rendition. Something like that. You might have heard it. In the Eastern Cape, however, they have strangely lost the click and will just do the whistle, which is very funny because the main language in the Eastern Cape, of course, is isiXhosa. So you will hear the whistles repeatedly called by a male as he does his displays for a female. So let's just take a brief moment and pause. We've now talked about calls quite frequently throughout this thing, and this is now the one like tip and like extra information that I can provide you. Forest birding is calls, vocalizations, and your knowledge of it will make your experience that much more amazing. Not just in knowing that you as a birder has got more skills, it also helps you with identifying more of them. Familiarity with the birds in the area that you are going to is where you should start. See what birds occur there. Don't focus on all the birds in a class or all the birds in a family or all the birds in South Africa. No. Make a small selection. Study their calls. And I do mean study. There are no shortcuts to this. You will need to listen to it repeatedly and have someone play it back to you so that you can guess what these calls are. That I found is the only way that you can start preparing. And then, of course, the long hours that you will need to spend in the forest through trial and error, tedious process of getting to know them. That's the only tip that I can give you. Like, take your study of bird calls, if you are keen to up your birding game, very seriously, and you will definitely reap the benefits. On that point, the more shy and skulking doves will mainly be found with their calls. Lemon doves, slightly more common than the tambourines. The lemon dove call is sometimes the only thing that gives them away. They've got this low frequency, almost ventriloquistic hooting that you will be scratching your head trying to pinpoint. And chances of encountering the two main woodpecker species that occur in the Hogsback forests are high, provided that you spend enough time staring up at each and every snag and dead tree that you pass. And frequently found Cape Parrots, they'll be in the mid layers of the forest, and forest canaries on the edges. Right, let's head into town now that we've covered the three or the forests that are on its edges. The properties in town are lush, big, sprawling. So if you've chosen one of the many accommodation units, accommodation sites in town, you will have quite a big garden to go walk around in. Some of the most common birds for the region can easily be found throughout of town. Black-headed orioles, somber green wolves, they'll be calling and moving throughout the day. Southern boo-boos can be found in the more thickety parts of the gardens, with only their back and forth duets giving them away. And an interesting thing about Cape white-eyes, if you open your regional or geographical variations book, the part of the Eastern Cape where Hogsback is situated is one of the dividing lines between one of the geographical variations within the Cape white-eyes subfamily. There's birds with less yellow on the breast and more gray, such as this individual, and there are birds with more yellow and less gray. Sometimes the flocks are separate, sometimes the flocks are mixed. So this is that true melting pot of Cape white-eyes in the Eastern Cape, should you want to come and see that. During the summer months, you will grow tired of the calls of the migrant cuckoos, and at times it will sound as if they're perched on your windowsill, and their non-stop calls will echo in your mind for weeks after they finally decided that things are getting way too cold for them. Birds of prey, unfortunately, aren't very common. There's a resident pair of jackal buzzard in town, and African crowned eagles can be seen circling over the forests on the warmer days. The smaller recipitors are rare. So little sparrowhawk, possibly most common, along with black sparrowhawk. They breed in town, but you won't find them very easily, unfortunately. The same goes for the more nocturnal of the birds. Both spotted and Cape eagle owls occur in the area, with the latter being extremely rare. I've only seen it on one occasion. And as you can see from the photo by Graham, his one sighting was at a great distance as well. One that you might be a little bit more lucky with, African wood owl. There are multiple pairs spread throughout town, and their call and answer duets in the evenings is some of the most wonderful parts of the Hogsback night. So you're probably now wondering, right, we've now covered forests, we've now covered gardens. Are there any water birds around? Well, there are two dams close to town. The one is called Robinson Dam in the east, and the other one is called the Municipal Dam in the west. If you want to go to the latter, you will need a permit. The permits can be obtained from the forest station close to the Arboretum. Just ask people for a reference to get there, and you can get your day permit to access that area. It passes through some forestry plantations, so that's just to cover your back. The dams, unfortunately, don't have much bird life, to be honest. They are cold, high altitude dams, and there isn't really beaches or sloping sandbanks on the edges that allow water birds to spend a lot of time. If you have 6 years to drive by 3 times a week, you will build up quite a decent list. But chances are high that on the day that you are there, it won't be very big. You might come across black-headed herons. They might be on the banks or in the grasses and reeds of the surrounding wetlands. Yellow-billed ducks and 3-banded plovers are possibly the most common you will find. But if it's an extraordinary day for you, you might just see a whisker tern or two flitting about. Other birds that have links with water can be encountered flying above it or around the dams. White-rumped swifts can be seen. Brown-throated martins can be seen, as well as white-throated swallows. And then, of course, mixing it up in the reeds on the edges of the dams, you will find the thick-billed weavers, with the female here on the left, male in the middle, and their exquisitely made nests on the right. Interestingly about these ones, during the non-breeding season, thick-billed weavers go into the forests to feed. I was quite speechless the day that I encountered a large flock of them flushing from the forest floor, having fed on something. During one of my walks, I spoke about that for weeks afterwards. So yeah, remember a little bit earlier the importance of the calls. In the reeds as well, listen out for lesser swamp warblers, little rush warblers, and Barrett's warbler. So their calls will be the only thing that you will see of them, unfortunately. Their gurgle calls, get to know them. They're quite nice. Right, so before we expand our search beyond the edges of town and the forests and the plantations, let's just mention the one bird that does occur in Hogsback, but that you will not see, unfortunately, at all. Drakensberg rockjumper. Yes, they are here. Where, do you ask? Right there. Now, where is that? Well, it's right up there. Now, that is the top of the Hogsback Mountain, or as the locals call it, Hog 1. If you want to give it a go, first get a permit from the forest station, right? Then you need to figure out the windy forestry tracks to get you to the access point. And then once you are there and you've parked your car, it's a 400-meter slog almost straight up to get to the top of that hill. And unfortunately, today's trip won't allow us to spend that amount of time. But if you want to give it a go somewhere in the future, the best of luck to you. It is well worth it to go and see them on this remote part of the Eastern Cape. So we have now seen all the town has to offer us. So we are now going to head north, and we are going to an area called Happy Valley. There we will find some grasslands, sprawling agricultural fields, some rocky ridges, and as you can possibly imagine immediately, this is where we go for the cranes. So both blue and grey crowns occur up here, sometimes in great numbers, especially when certain of the crops have been planted or is just about to reach that small sapling stage. They are close to the fields, close to patches, and in the times where you won't find many, it will definitely be one or two of them somewhere along the Happy Valley Road. On more of the open grasslands, you will encounter the bird that has currently taken over a large part of my life. Although rare, secretary birds do wander these high altitude plains. And should you come across them, please do record them on BirdLife. And if you think that you might have found a nest, please let me know. It's kind of important to me at the moment. If there are dead animals on the grasslands, either a sheep or a horse struck by lightning, who knows, you might come across some Cape vultures. They'll be soaring, feeding, scavenging throughout the higher grassland areas. There are no closely located nesting or roosting areas in the immediate vicinity around Hogsback, but due to the massive distances that these birds can travel on a daily basis, chances are that you might just see one if you're lucky. The common grassland species is mostly going to be African pipits. So yeah, get used to seeing them ad nauseum. And after burns, especially when the grasses are still very short, the bit rarer black-winged lapwings can also be found. Although they aren't necessarily confined to the grasslands, the upper grasslands, they do occur in the lower thornfelts as well. Denham's bustards can be seen on the odd occasion. There is one farm to the north of Hogsback where 7 males display each year on the edges of a bowl-shaped valley, and it is quite the spectacle to go and view. And sometimes if you can just drive around, you might come across them right between the village landscapes. So the other summer visitors in the area, Amur falcons, can be found in great numbers perched on the telephone poles across the grassland, bokmakkiries almost everywhere. And then, of course, on those rocky ridges, that's where you might just encounter the largest woodpecker in South Africa, the ground woodpecker. Very infrequent, unfortunately, but chances are there for you. And if there are any proteas, sugar bushes on those ridges or outcrops, the chances are very high that malachite sunbirds will be on the cards as well. And then the more normal grassland bird species, Cape grassbird, Cape longclaw, and eating chat perched on fence posts, as is their wont, will be easily encountered as you drive through the grasslands. On the more remote, higher regions, and we're now talking above 1,800 meters above sea level, so this is really high altitude grasslands, sentinel rock thrushes are a rare species to look for. So keep an eye out for them. And of course, the odd red-capped lark as well. Don't find that very often. So we've now done the northern grasslands. We're now heading down into the thornfelt below the mountains. And the first one that we'll talk about is a bit of an outlier when it comes to cuckoos, Jacobin cuckoo. If you open the big, and I do mean the big Roberts bird guide, the 7th edition, the one that you need to, like, that you use to keep a door open, there's a population of them that arrives in the Eastern Cape 2 weeks before the rest of the Jacobin cuckoo population arrive in South Africa. And the word used is inexplicably. And this is where they come. So the thornfelt below Hogsback, if you go beyond Alice, you might reach the Great Fish Nature Reserve. That is where these birds will occur. And we've heard them calling from the edges of the Auckland State Forest on the odd occasion. So this is quite a unique one to go and look for 2 weeks in advance to the rest of South Africa. Pin-tailed whiters, they flit about everywhere, and the call of the Diederik's cuckoo is a constant presence in the thornfelts below the mountain. If you do drive through some of the villages to get to some of the more remote areas, common starlings will be your exotic bird fix for the day, if you haven't seen that recently. And one of my favorites, Rufous nape larks, like the ant-eating chats, will be perched on almost every single fence post. And we're getting tired after a long day's birding, but geez, there are still big ones to go and see. And another one that's got a very, very soft spot in my heart, southern ground hornbills. Their southernmost distribution of their range in South Africa is the Eastern Cape province, and especially the Amathole range. There used to be a single lone female hanging around the Hogsback area. People would see her driving between Hogsback and Alice, walking on some of the open fields through the thornfelt. I've seen her on the odd occasion on the upper grasslands as well. So if you haven't seen a southern ground hornbill in the Eastern Cape yet, that's the place to go and look. And at this stage, with tired eyes and minds, we will just be filling the gaps in our lists. Fiscal flycatchers can be found around almost every corner, perched on the small thorn trees. We will briefly spot a family of redneck spurfowl running away along a cattle track. And if Lady Luck continues to smile on us this day, a red-throated wryneck will pause for a brief moment to congratulate us on a day well done. And yeah, so all that remains really is for us to go and find somewhere to have a cold beverage of your choice and a place to watch the sunset from, and preferably both of them at the same time. That's our trip done. If I'm allowed to quickly, and I'm sure that Melissa won't mind, to put a shameless plug in, we are proud, or I am very proud to be a co-host for a forest birding workshop. If you are interested in forests or forest birding, and you want to increase your forest birding skills, general knowledge on forests in South Africa, great. I'll be co-hosting with Mr. Mike Bridgeford and Mr. Bruce Ward-Smith, both of them former chairpersons of the Plettenberg Bay Bird Club, at the Flock to the Wilderness from the 24th until the 27th of May in the town of Wilderness. It's on the first day of the Flock, so please do go and register. If I remember correctly, and Melissa, please correct me a little bit later, as far as I remember, you don't need to attend the entire Flock to attend the workshop, but I can recommend that you attend the entire Flock. It is a wonderful experience to spend time with all your fellow birders. During the course, we will cover the wonderful biome of forests and the threats and conservation issues that affect it. And of course, there will be more forest birds than you can shake a medium-sized yellowwood tree at. So come and join us. It will be an awesome few hours of trying to cram as much forest birding knowledge into your head that you can handle. So our website, which Melissa will definitely tell you more about, the link to the event is available there. She chatted about it earlier as well. It'll be available afterwards. Please do go and register, and we'll see you there. And yeah, that's basically it from me. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend this evening. And if you're watching it later in the future somewhere on YouTube, thank you as well. I hope I've twisted your arm seriously in considering a trip to Hogsback. It's a place that's very close to my heart, and I'm sure that you'll feel the same way the moment that you step out of the car on top of that mountain. So thank you, and good birding.
Cassie, thank you so much, and you certainly have twisted my arm. That black morph Jacobin cuckoo is definitely going to be on my
Forgot to mention that.
Absolutely phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much. As someone said in the comments there, your passion, enthusiasm, and excellent presenting skills are hard not to want to make someone pack their bags and get down to Hogsback right now. Well done. And yeah, just to follow up, Cassie is correct. You can sign up for the Forest Birds workshop as a standalone. You do not have to sign up for the whole lab conference. And as you can see, if anything, tonight's show was anything to go by, Cassie is a phenomenal presenter, and Mike Bridgeford and Bruce Ward-Smith are also phenomenal humans. So join the three of them and learn a little bit more. I think you'll learn a lot more about your forest birds and support the BirdLife South Africa flock event. And it certainly is going to be very, very entertaining and very informative, and it will only set you back 250 Rand. And if you're not able to attend in person, there is a virtual option. So do get in touch with us and you can tune in and watch that if you're not able to be there in person. Cassie, we've had one question come through so far, and please do fire your questions through in the Q&A box if you have any questions for us. This is from Lindsay, and she's asking, are Fort Fordyce and Mpofu safe and worth visiting? And are any of the Hogsback specials more easily seen there than around the village itself? And a big thanks for the advice.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mpofu and Fort Fordyce are two wonderful reserves. I had the privilege of spending a bit of time with the reserve manager, awesome gentleman from the Gauteng region, who is running that reserve better than you could possibly imagine. So I can recommend that you do go and visit. Of course, it's the Eastern Cape. Funds are short, resources are few, so it will be a slight rustic experience, but well worth the visit. The landscapes are beautiful, and if you don't feel like Hogsback, you can still go look for forest birds in the Fort Fordyce area. There's equally wonderful forests, and keep an eye out for Cape Parrots. That was one of the edges of my research back in the day. There was a population of about 100 birds that roosted somewhere to the west of Fort Fordyce. I could never find them. Like spending weeks there, I could never find them. So if you do find a massive roosting area of Cape Parrots, please let the project know. That's one of the big gaps in our knowledge. But do consider going. It is well worth it. The road there is a bit dodgy, so do take a vehicle with a little bit of high clearance, but the landscapes are absolutely worth it.
Absolutely. I always said the Eastern Cape is probably one of the most overlooked gems in this country, both from a birding and just exploring point of view. So many amazing places to see. Cassie, I'm still waiting for a few more questions to come through, and I'm sure they will shortly. I know everyone gets super into their webinars and they only type them afterwards. But while we're waiting, you mentioned that Hadida ibis is now Hadada. And I must say, I was also completely taken by surprise when I saw that change on my bird lasser. I was madly trying to Google and see if there's any information on the internet about it, but it doesn't seem to be. All I can find is that they've taken it to a slightly more literal onomatopoeic translation of what the bird sounds like. So
then it's purely a dialect thing, because here it's Hadida, not. I heard about it a couple of years ago, strangely enough. We had some American students visiting, and they mentioned that in the US they were known as Hadadas. So it might be something that's from the Clements taxonomy system, that's what the birds are called there. And despite it not occurring anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, or at least in the US, we ended up with that. So that is a bit of a funny one.
Absolutely, but what an iconic species. All right, here we go. Con sent us a question. Do you ever host an Amathole hike, Cassie? And if you do, have you ever got any vacancies? Let us know. I think we're about to build in a secretary bird fundraiser.
I will admit that I have hiked it once. It is by far the most amazing hiking trail in South Africa. The current trail is run and managed by I need to try and remember his name. It's the manager from the Away with the Fairies Backpackers Lodge. So if you just Google Amathole Trails, you will be able to find access to it. and it's been improved a lot over the years. Apparently, since I hiked it, we were still rustic and roughing it, and it was crazy. It's apparently now quite luxurious. So it's definitely something to go and do. And unfortunately, no, I don't host any, but you've just given me an idea. So thank you for that. I might I might abuse that one.
Fantastic. No, I think we'll definitely have to brainstorm that a bit more. We've got a question here from Pauline, and she's asking whether you can advise on birding seasons in Hogsback and when the best times are to go.
It depends on whether you want to be cold or whether you want to be wet. If you want to be cold, go in winter. You might catch it with snow as well. If you want to be wet, go in the rest of the year. The birds that spend most of the target species, most of the forest specials, are in the forest all the time. So they're not migrants or movers, they are residents. It's just your cuckoos. For instance, the African paradise flycatcher, they will go down, they will disappear for a short while. Most of the other birds will be there throughout the year. It's just whether you are able to hear them in the forest, whether it's breeding season, whether the birds are more vocal, that you will be able to find or identify a few more on the day's list. So that's, I think, the only thing that you must consider. You will find all of the ones most of the ones we spoke about this evening in the winter months, in the autumn months, in the spring months, in the summer months. But during those latter spring and summer, you will find a few more because they are calling. You will be able to find them easier and pinpoint them. And of course, all the migrants are there as well. So yeah, that's the easiest I can give you. It was wonderful doing bird tours in all seasons. And yeah, dress warm if you're in winter. That's the big thing.
Absolutely. And I can only echo what you said about those bird calls. I find myself these days barely looking for birds when I'm driving along, just listening out for what when they call, which is very bad. One should rely more on your eyes. But yeah, it opens up a whole new realm and ability to detect stuff, particularly in those very dense canopies. So I agree with you, Cassie. Just put in the effort, learn the language, and yeah, use that new skill to your advantage, particularly in those beautiful forests. You mentioned rugged vehicles. In terms of all the areas you've discussed today, is 4x4 required for all of them, or can you get away with a less rugged vehicle?
When I moved to Hogsback, I drove a Kia Picanto. So I was fine. On the more wetter parts of during the more wetter parts of the year, the roads do get quite muddy. It's a clay base, so you do slip and slide quite a lot. But no, for town and all the general areas that you will access, you will be able to get past with a normal sedan. It is very bumpy. There are a lot of holes, especially on the more outlying dirt roads. So just drive nice and slow. It's a good thing because that'll let you watch birds more.
Absolutely. Having just driven back from Palabora down the Gravelot Road, there was more pothole than roads. So I unfortunately wasn't birding because there wasn't much road to find. But very, very good point that one can enjoy those birds. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, Cassie. So I guess I'll cede the floor to you if you have any last sentiments you'd like to share with everybody before we close off tonight's absolutely fantastic webinar. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Not really. Just thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you. Oh, there's one more that came through, Melissa. I'll tackle that one quickly. Any tips for photography in the canopies? All right, the
webinar's carrying on. Let's go.
A few of them. What I can recommend is do an upper body gym class because you continuously, especially focusing on your neck exercises, because the time spent looking upwards and holding a camera upwards will really work out your upper body. So no, find the open areas. So there's a lot of canopy gaps, if you want to call it that. And that's your best chance of getting at least the lower or from below shots. Some of the trails in the forest, they circle back above the lower sections. So in some of the gaps, you will be able to kind of see the trees that are lower down. So that's maybe the one option of the canopy photography. I had the unfair advantage. I'm able to climb trees quite high and sit in them to take pictures. So that is an unfair advantage, I will admit, that not everyone has. So the best I can do is just try and get as high as you possibly can to look down on the trees slightly lower through the forest gaps.
Thanks for that, Cassie. Yeah, I certainly use lots of camera gear that allows a lot of light in those very dark environments. It's one of the more challenging environments to get good photos if you can't get that aperture down and lots of light in. But,
get to know your M settings very well.
And your ISO. Brilliant. Well, hopefully that's everything. Thanks everyone for catching that one in the chat box that made its way into the chat. But Cassie, phenomenal. Any last words before we close tonight?
Just a thank you, all the best, and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cassie. Really wonderful, wonderful job, and great to have you as part of the team. And we look forward to many more conservation conversations. If tonight is anything to go by, we'll be knocking on your door again. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. We got lots of exciting talks coming up. I am going to leave next episode speaker as a surprise, but some really, really exciting talks lined up. As you'll see, we've got Trevor Hardiker coming to talk about his Western Cape big year he did last year, and Vikash Tataya from Mauritius, who will also be joining us to share some of the incredible birds and conservation work going on in that wonderful country. But thank you so much for joining us. As always, keep your eyes on the skies, keep enjoying those birds, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time for yet another conservation conversation. Good night, everybody, and stay safe.